Welcome to the RCM Ladder. We dive into career development and growth for revenue cycle professionals, helping you level up your career one episode at a time. Hi, welcome to the debut episode of the RCM Ladder. I'm your host, James Furbush. I am very excited for guest numero uno joining us. She is Ashley Toney, the Director of Revenue Cycle Compliance and Privacy Officer at St. Luke's Hospital, which is a small rural hospital in North Carolina, part of the Atrium Health System. And really excited to have Ashley come on, kind of talk about her career growth and development. Ashley, thanks so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So you started your career kind of in revenue cycle, Rutherford Regional, you've worked your way up. Now you're running revenue cycle for St. Luke's, smaller hospital, but part of a larger Atrium system. I'm very curious to really just start, as you sort of have thought about your career arc, what are kind of the key skills that you've developed over the years, sort of navigating that small place, but part of a larger system, kind of working your way up to director, starting, kind of entry level at Rutherford, very curious sort of what you have sort of learned as the big skills that have helped you the most in your career.
Well, there's certainly a lot of different things. Rutherford was a bit bigger than what St. Luke's is, but then it was a part of Lifelight.
Yeah.
And again, as you mentioned, St. Luke's is managed by Atrium Health. So you do have a little bit of a different dynamic. However, someone once said to me that in a smaller facility, you wear multiple hats, which is true, but you're an inch deep and a mile wide with your knowledge of what you're doing and all the things that you cover. But in a larger facility, you're a mile deep and an inch wide. So there's a lot of times where you may not know what happens before or after you. Neither is wrong. They're just very different. And I do think it is very important to understand what affects you. So again, what happens before you and then what you are affecting. Because if you don't, then you run into all kind of different issues. Of course, knowing your resources and where to find the answer. So we always talk about it's okay to say, I don't know, but know where to find your resources. Find a need, fill a need. That's a big one. That's something that I'm going to say since I started is big. Patients concerns and different things like that have ebbed and flowed as well. So again, finding what works, what the need is, thinking creatively about things, and then resolving patient concerns to where the patient leaves the conversation. Of course, you're consistent with policy, you're being fair, but then also they leave with the positive image of our hospital. They want to come back for services and they feel confident that they're taken care of in all aspects. So of course, important for our growth and volume at the hospital. And then know how to see and consider details when needed, but then also to think about the big picture and hospital goals. So know that you're not just a department isolated by yourself. I mean, but you really are an entire hospital working toward the same goal. You're all trying to hit patient safety, patient satisfaction, but really you are here for the community and to serve your community. Again, I mentioned earlier, being creative, especially in a smaller hospital, you don't have as many resources. And so you do have to be innovative with what you have. And then lastly, I would say efficiency. I'd asked my son about this and he said, well, you like to keep meetings short, but I like to be able to get to the point, but of course, be efficient with our time. There's so many things that are time fillers for us right now that every minute counts.
Yeah. I have so many follow-up questions. I'm going to start with that meeting one though, because I feel like running efficient meetings is a skill that really applies to, probably not just revenue cycle, but obviously, it's probably key there with you have to do more with less. You only have so many hours in the day. But we've all, if you're a working professional at this point, you've all been in those meetings where you're like, this should have been a 15-minute meeting. This didn't need to be a meeting. How have you sort of learned to run? Have you done anything to learn how to run efficient meetings? Have you just been always good at that? I'd love to hear more about how to run efficient meetings.
This is going to sound terrible, but being in meetings where you are not what not to do maybe is part of it. That's not trying to down anybody else's skill. It's just knowing, coming into it, being prepared, knowing again when you need to hit the high detail or when you need to be detailed and when you need to hit the high points, what you want to get out of it and making sure everybody's on the same page. And then a lot of times keeping people on track. But again, it kind of all depends on what your meeting is.
Yeah. I remember someone early in my career, they told me, they were like, if there is no agenda with the meeting, just decline it. And
Not bad.
I've never been able to do that, frankly, because I'm, too much of a team player, I suppose. But sometimes I think about that and I'm like, that person knew something that maybe the rest of us didn't. That's interesting. I want to back up. So the mile deep, inch wide, that distinction, I'd love to kind of go into that a little bit more too, because that's sort of a fascinating way to think about small company, big company. For you, what does that mean for you right now, St. Luke's? You're wearing a lot of hats. I mean, can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm wearing the revenue cycle hat and I'm wearing the compliance and privacy hat. So, two very different things. You really have to have a lot of knowledge to make sure that you are properly serving your facility correctly. But then also, and with your EMR, with ours, we are on Epic and we have different work queues. So I kind of think about it like this. You'll go to one facility and one person will work one work queue every day, all day. That's all they ever do. Might be one or two people that work that. And where we may have 20 work queues to where we're having to be masters, I shouldn't say masters, but know a bit about each one of these things and about each functionality of whatever piece. So it could be payment posting, it could be patient registration, and the list goes on. And yes, at one point in time, if you have, let's say, Medicare and Medicare denials, you become very specialized in it. Where at a smaller hospital, it's not that you don't become specialized in it, you just have to become specialized in everything else to make sure you're running a good shop.
Do you have a preference? I could see the benefits of one versus the other, certainly. If you're like a Medicare, Medicaid, like you're just doing that one thing, you probably become very good and knowledgeable about that one thing. And so I kind of see the benefit of doing that. But do you have a sort of preference? Do you like one versus the other or?
I think that depends on the day. I think you kind of always want what you don't have whenever you feel like you're being spread thin, and you can still be spread thin whenever you're siloed. But again, sometimes you're like, man, it would be great to feel like you were a master of a particular topic versus trying to make sure that everything's spread out. But there is a lot of beauty in being at a small facility and being able to see all those pieces connect because you really are the maker of your, and not that you wouldn't be at a larger facility, but you're the maker of your own result, kind of.
You probably also feel a deeper sense of that, the bigger or tied to the bigger picture of like,
Yeah.
to your point where, I think you said this earlier, which is like at the end of the day, we're here to help patients. We may be collecting the kind of payments and posting payments and things like that, but we're still helping that patient with their full experience. So you probably feel like a greater connection to that. I don't want to necessarily put those words into your mouth, but
No, and it is. And I think it also provides greater clarity. Then at one point in time, was a Medicare biller. And a lot of things that would come down, you would say, why did registration not catch that? That should have been something with registration. And so you think that they are slack. But then when you start realizing it really isn't registration, you're only as good as the information that you've been given. So that could come from insurance eligibility, what the patient gives you. And there really are so many uncontrollables, but whenever you can kind of see that and then talk to your team about, hey, this is where it's happening and what can we do to resolve that piece up front. Again, we're all working for the same goal. We're not sitting around being careless. We just have different obstacles to face. So it does provide clarity to the team as well.
yeah, that's awesome. So as you've sort of worked your way up in your career, what's something that surprised you about working in revenue cycle? It's funny for me because when I tell people, I'm like, oh, we, work with revenue cycle professionals, and everyone's always, what is, like I talk to family and they're like, what is a revenue? I'm like, well, finance, post payments, collect that, I have to, it's like such a weird title, but I'm curious for you. Sort of now that you've done it, you've been sort of in this industry, for a few years now, what's something that sort of surprised you the most about working in revenue cycle?
That you don't have to be landlocked to revenue cycle. So when
Okay.
I began, I started by installing lifelines, where you press a button and someone is alerted and can
Oh
come
yeah.
out, take care.
My
I was
dad
at
has one
the
of those.
education department. Yeah. Then I went to patient financial services, and this will tell you how long ago it was. We were in insurance follow up, and I had, instead of by payer, I had last names H through O. So again, it's a little bit, maybe not the most efficient, but we've all learned since then. Medicare follow up and billing, I was billing coordinator. Then I decided, all right, what else do I want to do? I think I need to become more well rounded. If revenue cycle director is something that I want to do. So I ended up going to patient access, and that was a lot more difficult than what I ever thought that it would be, but it was definitely a challenge. And then went to assistant revenue cycle director. And then from there, someone came and talked to me. We were going out to different doctors' offices and talking to them. What are the barriers to scheduling a procedure? Those kind of things. So we can make sure that there was no barriers to growth. And then the conversation was, well, hey, you seem to kind of like that part. What about growth and strategic planning? What about being the physician liaison? So I went and did that for a little bit. Under that hat, I ended up wearing marketing. I wore physician recruitment, again, growth and strategic planning. And now I'm back in the revenue cycle, but I'm also wearing the privacy and compliance hat. So I think whenever I first started, I thought, okay, it's going to be, as they used to call it, business office, kind of all the way. And you have a certain line, and that's really all you can do at this facility. I didn't think of all the other things that were non clinical that maybe I could do. Part of it is looking for opportunities and being able to use your skills because, again, it's not just revenue cycle, being able to dabble. Your willingness goes a long way. And then others trust you. They see what you've done and say, okay, well, you've got that skill. You're good at talking to X, Y, and Z. Why don't you come on and try this? And it really does expand your skill set, but it does widen your view quite a bit for the hospital.
Yeah, that's fascinating and really good to consider that, it's almost like it's not linear, right? I think a lot of people sometimes still think of careers as linear and they are not in some ways. And that's really kind of encouraging to hear, even in revenue cycle, that you could start in revenue cycle and bounce around to different parts of the hospital. It's sort of the same skills, same mission, sort of still kind of building that career.
Yeah, and I think that it made me a better revenue cycle leader too. A lot of times you're not really thinking about strategic planning being connected to revenue cycle, but you really do get a completely different viewpoint. It gave me more strategic mindset. We all have the businesses of within our department, making sure that we're fiscally responsible with our resources. Not that we weren't doing that beforehand, but it just gives you a completely different viewpoint of really the strategic planning, everything that goes in it, and your part in that as well. And for me, it in fact unlocked a different passion for me that I never realized that I had.
Passion for sort of strategy and planning, or yeah.
Mhm.
And does it, does that sort of that ability, does it make you more collaborative too? Because I would imagine there, you must have, I don't know if this is the right word, but a sort of greater empathy for other people in your organization that are doing, like you said, right? Patient financial access or patient access that was more challenging than you ever imagined. And so now you can sort of put yourself into the shoes of those people when you're trying to work and collaborate with them.
Yeah.
Is that a good assumption?
Yes, for sure. It's easy to think, let's say you're going to start a new service line, and it's easy to say, okay, we're going to start XYZ service line. We're going to have the doors open on this day, and the floodgates will open and everybody will come in. But there's so much more that has to happen, whether it's physician onboarding and making sure that is really a good and seamless product or and however, it's not just marketing. There really is so many other things to make sure that it goes well. Let's say patients come in and that first week is terrible. That's really going to set your stage for your volume in the future. So there is a lot of work that goes into that. And there's a lot of trial and error too.
So when you say open a line of business, is that like a new facility or what do you mean by that?
It could be, let's say, starting a cardiology program, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So do you have a vision for like where your career you want to go? I know you said, you sort of figured out all these different, you wore a lot of different hats, sort of make your way up to director. And that's incredible. But now that you're sort of a director, where are you thinking sort of that next phase of your career you want to go? Do you have a vision for that?
I do. As I mentioned, I used to only see the line of opportunity solely within the revenue cycle. But now, especially since I have such a wide variety or menagerie, I'd like to be able to help others with my knowledge, either hospitals, my community. Like I said, I enjoy growth and strategy a lot. I would like to even expand more outside of revenue cycle, just to become better, well rounded.
And so when you think about outside of revenue, give an example. What are you thinking outside of revenue cycle as you sort of think about that?
Gosh, that's really hard because every place that I thought that would have been a non-clinical place that I would have went non-revenue cycle was never where it went, or probably where my skill sets wouldn't have been as good in. So again, it's really hard to say. Kind of that opportunity meets you.
Yeah.
But again, I'm kind of looking for anything. I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what are the things that then you're like, as you're sort of thinking about that 5 years, whatever, 10 years, seven, I don't know, seven, sometimes people are only thinking 2 years. But as you're sort of thinking about that, are there things that you're working on, professional development that you're like, okay, I need to do X or Z, or there, fill that sort of skill gap as you think about what you're going to need to be able to handle to sort of wherever that next phase of your career goes?
Of course, there's certain certifications and things like that that I would be interested in doing. But more than anything is everything really is a learning experience. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm soaking up everything, learn everything that I can. Any opportunity I've been able to be a part of something, I want to make sure that I'm taking that back and figuring out how that kind of goes into the big picture. Being open and willing. So again, if that opportunity meets me, then, you know, how can I provide the best value for my facility? So I want to make sure that is what I'm doing. It may be what I enjoy, but if I'm not providing that value to the facility, then what good is it? And then not being afraid of taking opportunities as well.
Yeah, that not being afraid is so key. And I say that because I do feel like a lot of people, that fear in some ways, it's like, you're going to miss opportunities if you never take them, that sort of thing, right? You're going to like potential opportunities that you could qualify and be good at and do, if you are afraid of even putting your name in the hat, so to speak, you're gonna fail as a result. It's such a huge getting over that fear is such a huge career thing. I think at least for me anyways.
No, it is. And I mean, it comes across as I'm just fearless and out here willy nilly doing whatever, but it really wasn't like that. I was very scared to leave revenue cycle because I knew kind of what that line would be, what would be my next steps. And then whenever I left, it's a whole new world, but you know, how well are you going to succeed in this? And what am I going to miss if I'm not in revenue cycle? Am I going to become less relevant in that area? Am I less of a master in that? And you don't have to be a master, but knowing the business of your area really does make a difference. And you don't want to be left behind per se. So
Yeah. What's the, for you, like, what's been the hardest thing about like sort of just working in revenue cycle? I like we hear the horror stories, right? Where it's just like labor shortages and working with payers and, the margins at hospital health systems are really tight, especially our rural ones as well. And so it feels like a pressure cooker in some ways when you read these stories. But I'd love to hear from you. What is the hardest thing about sort of working in revenue cycle for you personally?
insurance payers by far have become extremely difficult. I thought that they were difficult when I first started. It doesn't hold a candle to what it is now. How hospital reimbursement works, I do think it is a challenge for even people within the hospital that are not dealing with that to understand that. And again, everybody's on in their own area. I understand that. But more than anything, patients do not understand how their insurance works. They don't understand how a hospital is being reimbursed. They really think that you're out to take their money, to rip them off. And that really is not it. They think if they have a $10,000 bill, that the hospital's getting $10,000 and that your charges are inflated, when in reality, you may only be getting $1,000. And, they have patient responsibility too, but in their mind, again, you are ripping them off substantially. But the biggest thing I would say, and this has really gotten worse over years, is how upset people can be. And sometimes they can be quite violent. We were talking the other day. I think a lot of times we think it's really only one area or another. You think about clinical areas, and yes, that is true, but nobody really likes to get a bill. And so they're angry and they're frustrated in the first place. They don't understand, it could be heightened from whatever condition that's going on with them or their family. And they can lash out. And I mean, it can be everything. Like I said, it can be very violent at sometimes. And you would think, well, how would that really be that way? But I mean, I've had people spit on me and everything else. So it's definitely gotten worse. And that's not something I expected, but it's a hard part.
Good Lord. Really?
Yes. Yes. There have been several instances people really. Now, I'm all for apologizing. I'll be the first to say I don't know. I'll be the first to apologize. But there's a lot of times where they've picked an insurance. This is how it is. You really try to explain it, and you really want to be an advocate for that patient and help them every way you can. But you owe me an apology. Get down on your hands and knees and tell me you're sorry because I've got a $20 bill. And, you want to be able to help the patient, but then this is a very odd situation to be in.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, I can't even imagine. That's horrible.
Yeah, it is. And being a part of some of those conversations, I mean, and I hear it quite a bit, you do grow a thicker skin, but part of you, when you go home at the end of the day, thinks, is it really worth it? I'm really trying hard. I really want to do the best for my community, but is it worth it whenever there's not a greater understanding? And you can try to do everything you can. A lot of times it's just they have their mind made up on it. So I
Yeah.
know there's a lot of people that's even thought about getting out of healthcare. You've heard about that with the clinical side, but even in the non-clinical side, especially if you're patient facing, there's been a lot of people that saying, I'm not sure that's what I want to do anymore.
G- So I have two follow-ups, I think, and I'll start on the patient side. I mean, do you guys have this? Is it a matter of patient education? What do you do to sort of help patients? I know St. Luke's is part of a smaller community, so you're probably intermingling with the patients who get care there, church, community events, things like that. Is it a patient education thing? Would you guys have discussions about how to better sort of educate and support patients in that way so that that sort of behavior doesn't happen or happens less?
Yes, we have tried several different things. One of the things that is unique about St. Luke's is we do have people on site that you can come to and talk to, and we'll spend as much time as you need to be able to help you sort through your bills. And if we can't help you, we do have other resources. But again, some patients come in with the mindset and you really can never get over it. We were talking about it the other day, and sometimes there's instances where you will tell something to a patient and it's, you're the hospital, you're my enemy, everything that you say is going to be against me. But if you almost had a liaison in between there that was, hey, I'm between you and the hospital. And even though I'm saying the same thing the hospital is, I don't feel like, I don't know, it seems to come something different when it comes from somebody else that seems to be a little less biased per se. But I don't think social media has helped in this either. So as much as you're trying to combat it, when you see people talking about their bills and they don't really give all the details. And again, I think part of that is they just don't understand it. But we try to be able to provide all the resources that we can, let them know that there's not usually just one way. We'll talk to their insurances. Again, there's several things that we will do, but we do want to take the time out for the patient to make sure that they know that they're heard. But again, money is a difficult subject to begin with.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Um, Especially when everything is so much more expensive these days, and hospital bills are often unplanned and things like that. For your as a people manager and a team lead, now on the flip side, you kind of mentioned that even sort of on the clinical side, obviously people are leaving because of the pandemic and things like that. that's now sort of flowing down into the sort of business revenue cycle side, non-clinical side of healthcare as well. But I mean, are there things that you do to sort of encourage teammates? Like, how do you deal with that as sort of a people manager when people are burnt out and want to leave and maybe don't want to get spit on? I can't blame them for that. But are there things that you do? Do you have strategies or ways that you sort of help, your people sort of navigate those challenges?
We've had to get really creative. De-escalation, that seems like something that's been going on for years, and yes, that's true, but you really have to get creative in the de-escalation it really is not the same anymore, so there is a lot of that. There's also a tap-out system. If you feel like you've kinda come to the end of your rope, or there's nothing more that you can say, get somebody else in there and let us try to share the burden or be able to explain it something, maybe a little bit different because they could just be so heated with that one person. So yeah, we have several different things that we are trying to do. Again, are they always effective? No, because it seems like every time there's something new that comes about, and sometimes that anger can really be hard to combat. But we also want to make sure that our folks feel really comfortable, especially the ones that are not just on the phone, but that are in person, that we would have an alert system. You do have the ability to be able to, maybe I should say, there's empowerment within the team that we don't want patients to be able to walk all over. Not that we need to be rude or dismissive of any issues, but we can empower our teammates to know that they don't need to be spoken to disrespectfully as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so important to have that in place. Well, actually, this has been fantastic. So we got two more quick segments. We're gonna transition real quick. We're gonna do the lightning round. This is something new I've never done before. We're gonna try it out and see how it goes. I'm gonna ask you a couple quick short questions, and you just rapid fire give me kind of your best answer, and then we're going to end. So part of the benefit of this show is that revenue cycle professionals like Ashley get to sort of talk about any job openings they have. So if you've loved this conversation with Ashley and you want to work with her, she's going to kind of tell you about some job openings. You can apply. You get a good sense of what it's like to kind of have her be your manager and kind of work with her. So we're going to try that out as well. So, all right. So let's go do the lightning round real quick. So, oh, sorry, go ahead. We're going
Oh,
to,
hey, I'm ready.
all right. Lightning rounds. Here we go. Okay. Number one, what's the most important metric that you measure that gives you the most anxiety in your job?
AR days based off of continued payer restrictions and the difficulties that surrounds that.
And is that just because that's cash in the door or delays in cash in the door? Okay.
Yeah.
What is your biggest goal you want your team to achieve this year?
So we're part of a few different teams. I would say as a hospital, growing volume, continuing to be a pillar of our community, to be able to grow stronger. And then for revenue cycle, being creative with how we're reaching our goals. Our days based off of the new process that we have, and then being more efficient. It was asking me a question about AI yesterday and what my thought was about that. And I think it can be a really great thing and something that we can explore. But when you're part of a small facility, you don't always have the resources to be able to do that. And a lot of AI it used to be more of a want, and now it's becoming more of a need. So you're really trying to figure out how can you balance all of these things creatively, do this and still be relevant in your community. And again, the biggest thing is how can we make sure we're taking care of our community well?
Yeah, that's amazing. Lightning round. I didn't account for wanting to have follow ups, but that's not the point of this segment. So we might have to have a part two later
All right.
on.
I'm good with that.
Uh, all right. Finally, what's something you wish more people would talk about when it comes to revenue cycle, either in the industry, in your community? What is just something you wish there was more focus on a conversation within kind of the revenue cycle community?
The reality of insurance impacts, how a hospital is truly being reimbursed, the difficulty in being able to keep the doors open for a facility, office, whatever it might be. And then again, there is a misconception that the hospital or facility is ripping people off. Like I mentioned, social media does not help. And we truly do want to help the patient, even though that might not be what the thought is. And then I guess dive down just a little bit more. I think that we face a lot of issues being a smaller hospital. It's harder to find good vendors. And it's not so much finding good vendors as people that want to work with you because you're not the huge facilities. So, they don't really think about the connections that you have or the word of mouth, how tight it is within revenue cycle. Again, being with payers and that being small, you don't get the reps, you don't get the attention, and your money doesn't matter. But in fact, it matters. I'm going to say maybe even more. It impacts this hospital greatly whenever it does or doesn't receive it. And then being critical access has its own set of issues. The softwares don't accommodate for the difference. And additionally, payers aren't familiar with critical access as well, or as familiar. Maybe I should say that.
Again, with so many follow-ups, we'll have to save it for another day. That's so great. All right. So as promised, part 3. All right, Ashley, what job openings do you have at St. Luke's? What are you hiring for currently? Talk to us about kind of what roles you're looking to fill either on your team or kind of within the revenue cycle department where at St. Luke's.
Within my area, we do have a payment posting representative. So we do have that position. That would mainly be insurance and self-pay payments posting. We also have some patient access representatives. But again, get on St. Luke's. We're in Columbus, North Carolina. So keep that in mind because there is more than one. There are a lot of different job opportunities, even if it isn't within revenue cycle. Tell your friends, tell your family. We're always looking for someone to come on board. St. Luke's is a really good hospital, very family friendly. You can tell they really care about their community. As far as what I'm looking for, you may not have experience in some of these positions, and you don't always have to. Willingness to learn and a good attitude goes a really long way. That's probably maybe even more important than the experience in some factors. But then we want to be able to foster the learning. We realize that St. Luke's is small and there may only be so many places that you can go, but we do want to be able to get you ready for your next step in the career. I was lucky enough to have people that afforded me the opportunity. And so we want to be able to show others the opportunity, especially as we mentioned right at first, when you're having to wear so many different hats, you do have the opportunity to show people several different things. So we want to be able to do that as well.
That's awesome. I always love the, hire for, I don't know, what is it? It's a hire, train for skill, hire for personality, train for skill. There's so many jobs that you can get trained up on. And if you have the right attitude, you don't necessarily need to sort of have that initial experience, I think anyways. That's so great. Ashley, where can people learn more about you? I know you kind of said his social media, maybe not so healthy, but are you on LinkedIn? If people want to kind of connect with you and learn more, where can kind of people find you?
Yeah, I would welcome that. I'm on LinkedIn, Ashley Toney. So certainly reach out that way. And I always look forward to talking to you. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. We all face, I'm going to say that there's a lot of people in revenue cycle that, yeah, that's exactly the same thing we're facing. But, hopefully this provide a little bit of different insight as well.
Awesome. Ashley, well, thank you. This has been great. And I think we'll have to circle back maybe in 6
Yeah.
months and kind of do part 2. So this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.